It's the 5th of March, 1977 at Kyalami. In the middle of the race, one of the most brutal moments ever caught on camera goes down. So graphic, you'd never believe how it even got to that point. What went wrong? Well, every fucking thing.
Just walk into the parking place where there was nobody. And I want to pray with God and say what I'm doing here.
Get ready, because this one is hard to take. This is the day F1 would rather erase from its history. When you think of F1, what comes to mind? Probably speed, fast cars, and all that tech. But these days, safety's a big deal too. Well, it hasn't always been like that. And nope, I'm not talking about the very early days of F1. Through the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s, safety was a huge concern. And I mean huge. In the 70s, safety wasn't even a priority.
Those cars were all effectively a mobile bomb because in an accident, the fuel went everywhere and caught fire.
Honestly, it was so insane that I made a video about it a while back. But if you're too lazy to watch it, I'll break it down for you here. Basically, the 70s were the most dangerous decade. The cars were fast enough to kill you, but safety was far behind. Heck, it wasn't even close. Trust me, I could go on all day about how bad safety was back then. It wasn't just the cars or the tracks. Everything, from protocols and materials to medical support. Drivers were getting into these death traps hoping to survive the season. No guarantees.
A lot of drivers have the philosophy that it's always someone else who has an accident, it's never themselves. But of course you're always on the very thin line between survival and even disaster. Or certainly dead.
But let me ask you, if you were a young dude back in the 70s, would you want to be an F1 driver? Would you get into one of these shit boxes knowing you could die every single weekend? Sounds nuts, right? Yet, even with all the danger, tons of young dudes still dreamed of making it into F1. The adrenaline, the glory, the speed, nothing could stop them. That's the crazy part. They weren't afraid to risk everything for a shot at glory. By the mid-70s, the youngsters were aiming to take over the Clarks, Stewarts, Hills, and Fittipaldis, and new stars started to shine. Trust me, it was a decade where tons of amazing talent came up. Francois Sauver, Carlos Reutemann, Patrick Depailler, and the list just keeps on going. One of the most promising drivers back then? Tom Pryce. And it's not just me saying it. But how did he make his mark in history? Sadly, it was in a way no one ever saw coming. Presenting Mr. Tom Pryce. Humble, fast, and handsome. Born in 1949 in Ruthin, Wales, into a middle-class family, Pryce got interested in cars when he was just 10, driving a baker's van. Yep, pretty random, I know. He knew he wanted to be a race driver already in his teens, and his idol was Jim Clark. Pryce got into motorsport at 20. Pretty late by today's standards, but that didn't matter too much because Trevor Taylor, an ex-F1 driver, and surprise, surprise, old Clark's teammate, gave him his first shot in the sport. He quickly moved up through the lower categories. He wasn't just fast, he handled the car in the rain like nobody else. And that's the kind of speed I want to see when you hit the subscribe button. By 1972, Pryce was racing an F3 and even won a support race at Brands Hatch during the F1 Race of Champions, where he beat more experienced drivers like Roger Williamson, Jochen Mass, and even this man. By then, it's safe to say that Pryce was one of the most exciting young talents over there. The next year, he won 3 races in Formula Atlantic and made his F2 debut with Ron Dennis and his team Rondel Racing. He even snagged an award, which apparently was given every year to the next-gen stars of the season. With all that going on, all signs pointed to one thing, and that's exactly what happened in '74 when the brand new Token team gave him his debut at the Belgian GP. But his real shot in F1? That came with Shadow, a team that had only been around for a year. They didn't exactly have the most reliable cars, but they became kinda midfield. If things went crazy, they could even grab a podium or two each season. You could say they'd be like Alpine today. Pryce joined them at the 1974 Dutch GP and stayed for the next few seasons. He replaced Brian Redman, who had stepped in for Peter Revson after he tragically passed away in a test crash before the South African GP.
It's a big action. These cars are full of fuel. The beginning of this, there's a driver.
American motor racing driver has passed away after a fatal crash at the Kyalami circuit.
Revson was the 5th driver to pass away in an F1 GP that decade, and sadly, he wasn't the only one in '74. Helmut Koenig also lost his life at the US GP. One of the many doomsdays of the '70s. But none of that stopped Price from racing. He grabbed his first points in Germany that year, and he was killing it in qualifying, sometimes getting his shadow right up there with the fastest. In 1975, he got his first F1 win at a non-championship race at Brands Hatch after starting from pole.
There we go. The end of the race of champions. Tom Price and his Shadow Ford takes the checkered flag.
Then in 1976, he grabbed another podium in Brazil and came close on 2 other occasions. With results like that, people were obviously hyped about Price. I have to say, he had his fair share of crashes too, but I mean, with that crappy shadow, who wouldn't? It was clear that with faster cars, he could achieve great things. But in '76, these two took all the spotlight.
The world champion has walked into the pit.
Champion James Hunt by just 1 single point.
With all this, people were pretty excited for 1977, not knowing the disaster that was about to unfold. A season with some serious competition between all teams, but the case being the South African GP. With 2 winners from 2 different teams in the first 2 races, everyone's wondering who's going to take the next one. Price was in P2 in Brazil, but his engine gave up just 7 laps from the finish. Anything could happen in South Africa. Welcome to Kyalami, a warm and sunny day on a beautiful track. Here we go. Hunt leads off the start, with Lauda and Scheckter right behind. Price, after a rough start, drops to P22, but quickly starts making his way back up. By lap 7, he's back to P15, just as Lauda takes the lead. The race stays pretty chill until lap 21. A shame for Zorzi. Apparently an issue with the fuel metering unit. Zorzi's car is on the start-finish straight, which is on a hill, meaning the cars zooming in cannot see him until they're almost there. And nope, the race is still going full speed. It's the '70s after all. Perfect recipe for disaster. A couple of marshals spot the fire, but they're across the track, and you're probably guessing what happens next. With barely any visibility, they run towards Zorzi's car. Then Hans-Joachim Stuck comes out of nowhere and barely misses them. Insane. But right behind him, Price is flying at 170 miles per hour, and the inevitable happens. Oh my God. The second marshal just vanishes in a couple of seconds. Price keeps going straight, out of control, and slams into Jacques Lafitte at the first corner. There's something off. Price's helmet is ripped off, almost falling off his head, and he's just motionless, with blood all over. Hell. As much as it feels like a nightmare, all of this is totally real. And man, I can't even find the words to explain it. I don't think I even need to say it, but sadly, both Price and the marshal Jensen van Vuren, just a 19-year-old, passed away instantly. Truly, a terrible tragedy. Van Vuren's identity wasn't confirmed until after the race, when they called in the other marshals, which shows just how brutal the whole thing was. Price was only 27, with a brilliant future ahead of him in F1, and Van Vuren, for God's sake, was just a kid. I can't imagine what everyone who saw it live must have felt.
Je pense que c'est une leçon pour tout, pour moi aussi, parce que les organisateurs ont démontré que pour lui, c'est plus important l'argent que la vie humaine ne pas seulement la vie de le pilote, mais la vie de le public aussi.
And of course, all the people who knew and cared about Price and Van Vuren. Just heartbreaking. After this awful tragedy, the FIA had to step up and made it a rule for everyone on track to wear helmets and fireproof jackets, plus making sure marshals and track workers were properly trained. But let's be honest, F1 back then was nowhere near safe. Unfortunately, more tragedies had to happen before they actually started investing in safety.
We got him out of the cockpit, got his helmet off, got an airway into him, and I saw from his neurological signs that it was going to be a fatal head injury.
O povo brasileiro precisa de comida, educação e saúde e pouco de alegria. A alegria foi.
Messieurs, la séance est ouverte pour cette réunion de la commission de Formule 1 qui doit mettre au point définitivement tous les problèmes.
Honestly, it's a relief that stuff like this is way less likely now. Just to give you an idea of how much safety's improved, watch this video. And as always, thank you for watching.